There I was, sweating in my uncomfortable seat, surrounded by the sounds of an obnoxious, unsynchronized clapping. Todd Howard had just made his usual appearance on the annual E3 Gaming Expo stage. The crowd was anxious, awaiting their anticipated announcements, ready to be possibly disappointed. Myself, I wasn't at the expo. Enduring the claustrophobic mania for some video games? Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good RPG once in a while, but that wasn't my intention on this day in question. I was focused on Howard's body language, that glare in his eyes, looking for any subtle off movements. Even his choice of dialogue, there's been something bugging me for some time now that I have this firm and dedicated belief for. Todd and the company of Bethesda are in fact a part of a secret cult. And I know, it sounds crazy, I get it. But you gotta hear me out, okay? So allow me to take you back to that traumatizing experience that actually started all of it. Orange, red, yellow. The leaves brought an offset of color to an otherwise gloomy autumn day. The season also happened to be the prefix to the disc that was held in my hands. Fallout 4. I was a little late at having me try at the game. I picked it up around November of last year. Still, I'm pretty excited to give it a go. It's gained a lot of popularity after all. With the game in my PS4 console, I recall myself sitting on my bed for hours on end. I was fully absorbed into the wasteland-filled virtual environment, forgetting about the spilled cup of cola on the floor next to my feet and the fallen slice of pizza on my bedsheet. The real world around me was ultimately non-existent. It wasn't until my controller died that reality peeked through again. I'll, however, only use this moment of clarity to freak out and quickly plug in another charging cable between my system and the controller. I had to hurry and jump back into the Fallout universe. This is where I felt like I was at least worth something. This is where I didn't feel alone. Fallout 4 was a game where I could build, fight, and help people in need. The settlement crafting system pulled me in, allowing me to create houses out of resources I worked so hard for. Enemies that got in my way, I could fend off, using practical weapons I made myself. On quests, I found mutants and irradiated hostiles, the likes of which led me to achievements, accolades that made me feel great and wanted in this made-up reality. Finally, something made life livable that didn't have to be prescription or recreational drugs. My virtual ecstasy, of course, came to an abrupt halt. I began noticing some things out of the ordinary, even for a game of fantasy. I'd come up to these electronic terminals in the game and noticed some patterns. Whether I was in a shopping mart, a library, or a museum, the same word would pop up on the terminals, along with the rest of the text. I guess I never really noticed until I saw it appear even in multiples on some of the screens. The word that struck my attention was end. And most people wouldn't even bat an eye to this. The game is set in this post-apocalyptic world, so the word end is fitting. For one reason or another, it didn't feel fitting to me at all. I see this word pop up all the time throughout my life. Everyone has that magic number that seems to follow them everywhere they go, whether it's the lucky number 7 or the unlucky 13. Mine is the word end. I see it inside gas stations, grocery stores, the daily newspapers, cereal boxes, you name it. The word, it's constantly thrown right at me. And as soon as I started noticing this, I decided to look at one more terminal in the game. I came across one that was fairly easy to get to. There wasn't much disturbance, just some destroyed cars, no enemies in sight. The terminal didn't even seem unusual at first, with the same common words lit up on the monitor. Then, something obstructed the screen. The entire thing filled up with my least favorite word typed over and over, and it sped up gradually, eventually to a point that my eyes weren't even keeping up. I was incredibly confused, wondering if this was just part of a video game, like some random special quest, who knows. It was then that I turned the game off, not caring about where I was or, hell, when I last saved my progress. I was a little too spooked to continue. Later that evening, I shared the experience with one of my close friends while hanging out at his house. I told him I finally gave the game a shot and mentioned what happened, hoping he wouldn't judge me and perhaps he'd know what I was even talking about. My questions, to my dismay, weren't answered. I've put in hundreds of hours into Fallout 4, and that isn't anything I've witnessed in my playthroughs, he stated. This led me to believe that I'd simply played the game for so long that it took a mental toll on my psyche. Somehow this theory made me feel worse. Walking back home that day, my phone kept ringing from all sorts of numbers, all of which I assumed were telemarketers, scam calls, whatever. Considering I didn't recognize the numbers, I ignored them for a while, and then there was one I just, decided to answer. Hello? I questioned in a cautious tone. Hey, this is GameStop. Your copy of Fallout 4 you ordered has arrived from the warehouse. You can come pick it up anytime. We're open till 9 today. Thanks? I responded in a confused fashion. I started answering more calls, my phone's bombarded with these new numbers one after another. Perplexed would be an understatement of which to describe my mind at that point in time. Each phone call is from a different GameStop, at least a dozen or so across the country, calling to tell me I had a copy of Fallout 4 ready to pick up. And at this point, I was more so frustrated than confused. I assumed my friend was playing some sort of prank at my expense, and eventually I just auto-blocked the numbers as they kept rolling in. Despite knowing where the calls were more than likely coming from, something about the ordeal again wasn't sitting with me. To make matters worse, something far more peculiar happened upon opening the door to my home. I didn't walk through the doorway, no, not in the slightest. As soon as the front door opened, I found myself sitting on my bed, controller in hand, looking directly at the TV screen. It's tough for me to explain, but it felt as if I'd never even left the house. The game itself was still running, stopped right where I'd left off, the word N plastered across the terminal screen, yet again, multiplying rapidly. I shot up from my bed and unplugged both my PlayStation and television. I looked up and noticed something, and everything in the room was exactly how I left it. The walls, they were kind of different. The word N surrounded the perimeter of my bedroom, were in all different colors and sizes. At first, I was fucking outraged, wondering who had broken into my home and vandalized my room. I thought it might have been my friend, pulling out all the stops to severely spook me, and it's definitely working. This explanation fell flat when I realized that the word painted across my room was written in my own handwriting. Oh, hold on. This doesn't even make any sense. A harmless glitch, hallucinations, writing on the walls. I mean, what the fuck does it mean? And at this point, I wasn't sure. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it, and without a better plan in mind, I decided to go directly to the source, Todd Howard himself. And this is what brought me over to a room of boisterous clamor, waiting for the presentation to be over. I grew anxious sitting there, hoping I could speak with Mr. Howard. I didn't know what he'd say or if he'd even believe me. But I was a slave to my own wishful thinking. Perhaps he could explain all my worries away and put my mind at ease once and for all. Unfortunately for me, my issues couldn't be fixed with a day one patch or some mystical update. My heart racing, there finally came a time everyone left their seats. My legs were shaking, but that was mostly from sitting for such a long period of time. Just as I was about to stumble through the exit and head backstage, a man grabbed me by the arm and pulled me aside. And it was none other than Todd Howard, in answer to my prayers. "About time, sir. We've been expecting you," he explained. "You have." "Of course, I've been waiting for you to get the hint, to finally come join us. Just please don't tell anybody," he replied. "Join you for what?" "I'm gathering a number of people to help us at Bethesda to start a doomsday plan. I'm not at liberty to say why you or any of the others were chosen, but I can tell you that we are using Fallout as a net to capture those that can be of use to us. It also foreshadows what the world will look like in the near future. That's if, of course, you and the others are willing to join us. We can't do it on our own." "What would happen, hypothetically speaking, if I don't join?" "Well, you're free to do whatever you like, but the end has already begun. And if you don't help us, somebody will take your place. And I just don't know that you'll regret it. The clock is ticking." Mr. Howard handed me a business card, upon which was a text, "Pre-register for your spot on the end list today," along with a 1-800 number. I took the card and went back to my hotel room to get some rest and actually process everything. It'd be a nice way to relax and hopefully cope with the strange events occurring in my life. I would soon find that relaxation was nowhere within reach. Entering my room, anger and disorientation came over me. The TV in the hotel room was lit up with a copy of Fallout 4 playing. It was stuck on the same screen with the word N typed up all over it, just as it was back on that November day. As if this wasn't enough, my phone rang, though this time a number I recognized. It was my dad. who I responded with, "Hey Dad, what's up? I'm sorry to bother you during a trip, but I have some unsettling news to share with you. Your brother, he just passed away moments ago." And at that point, I am completely fucking shocked and despaired. I was never close to my brother, mind you, with him always being away at war and whatnot. It sounds horrible, but I felt like he was more of a distant relative than a sibling. But even then, it's a loved one. My heart still sank. The nurses aren't completely certain, but they claim radiation poisoning was at fault, and I find that questioning because no bombs have ever been dropped near his location. They're going to do a further analysis in the coming weeks to let us know. I'll be back in town as soon as possible. Please keep me updated if any other information comes up, and I'm not even sure how to handle it. I was just talking to him a couple days ago. I will, son. This is just as hard for me, and I'll be devastated for as long as the world lasts. He'll be looking down on us, smiling. At least he's in a better place. My dad saying that? In this tone of hurt and heartache? He then changed the subject, probably, I guess, to lighten the mood for sure. Something he very awkwardly did to avoid dealing with, the serious issues. By the way, I found a piece of mail I found stuck in my door tonight. Pretty odd for a Sunday. It has my name on it, but I think it's for you. It says something about a Fallout 76 beta invitation, and has the word end written all over it. Do you want it? I hung up on my own dad, and I'm not sure why or how I found myself in this ongoing nightmare, but I feel like I'm trapped in my own apocalypse. Take these words however you'd like, believe what you want, but Bethesda, they're not a game company. Todd Howard is up to something, and this is the start of an end. We have not done one of these in a while, have we? So, ladies and gentlemen, while it's not exactly a return to the creepypastas as always, it's fun to delve into them here and there, while I wanted to really dive back in and see what gaming creepypastas were like, because I actually reinstalled Fallout 4 and I've been playing it a fair bit, and I wish I had the affinity, the love that this creepypasta author has with Fallout 4, because I am just really not feeling it. That game is, going off topic, pretty subpar. You need mods to kind of fix it, but then again, this isn't a review for Fallout 4. This isn't even my opinions, because frankly, my opinion should only be about the creepypasta that we have read. Now, it's not the best story that I've read. In fact, it is far from it. I think we've read some really, really awesome creepypastas way back in the day, and this one, I wouldn't even say is close to the worst. It's sort of that in-between type deal for me, because usually when I look at bad creepypastas, we've read bad ones, okay? We've read ones where plushies assault you right after you're done playing your video games. See, the reason why I actually wanted to read this one is because, A, it was a game that I was playing at the time, and one of the most important things for a gaming creepypasta, in honestly my opinion, is how realistic it can feel in terms of the game that you're playing. And to witness something like Fallout 4, displayed in such a manner where really the creepiest thing begins to happen is with the word end being repeated on a terminal, which, while to me it isn't really scary, I can definitely associate that with many of my Fallout playthroughs personally. I think anybody that has played Fallout 3, New Vegas, the more Bethesda tiered Fallout games has definitely experienced that weird moment. And a lot of people will allocate that to the Dunwich borers or the Dunwich elements of those games. I think there are elements of that weird moment that occur at every moment in a Fallout game anyways. So this one really did hit me in that regard. I definitely felt that what I was reading was certainly very plausible, and that's kind of what got me in. But I think what made me really sucked in for maybe the wrong reasons was the portrayal of Todd Howard. We all know our Lord and Savior Todd Howard, the sweet, sweet little lies that he might dictate into our ears one day, kind of leads into Fallout 76, at least how this described it, I guess fairly alright. Now, do I believe that Todd Howard is running some doomsday cult? Most definitely not. I think at that point when we got to the story, it was a little bit of a jump in the shark kind of moment, but it still stuck around far more to the point where I could at least tolerate that, and even if that kicked in, the rest of it was okay enough that I let it stay on the plate. I think a lot of gamers portray Bethesda in this weird sort of light sometimes. Is Bethesda really the vault tech company that we like to, that we would hope they are? Maybe so, ladies and gentlemen. But with Fallout 76 coming out into the horizon, maybe it's not so far in the future that Bethesda may plan an MMO like Well, really, that's what they're planning in the end game. Nothing to the extremes as this, but it was an interesting little read to see Bethesda portrayed as your lovely vault tech, and to see the cult of Bethesda kick in and almost defend, or at least side by them, even in the grimmest of moments. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to ask you what you think about this story in particular. Did it give you a chuckle? Did it give you a spook? Did it give you something in between? Let me know. Big credit thanks to RT Maxim, the author over there. I actually messaged the individual beforehand, so we had a little correspondence, and it came to this little video. A lot of people have asked for a creepypasta, and I hope this might have might have satiated someone to an extent. I know that there were people who came up to me, followed me when this was what I did, and I figured I might as well come back and do something of the sort. But really, one of the big reasons for this video is I have a big creepypasta haunted gaming type video in production. It's a long type deal, but frankly, it's very related to what we just started with when I first did the Haunted Gaming series. So, that being said, new beginnings to something that, well, revitalization is the keyword that we're looking for. Let me know what you think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back to reading more spooky stories. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am